Here for week 2 of ProCon at the Pier, the return of civil discourse. Thank you everybody for coming. You thought you were here for the sunset, but this is what you're really here for. ProCon at the Pier, just so you know, this is a local effort to try to bring a little bit of respectability back into our political discussions. We wanted to feel like we're talking to each other as people, as humans. We respect one another, and we might not agree on these issues, but we can talk to each other civilly about it and disagree without being disagreeable. This week we're going to be exploring the issue of the death penalty. The question is death penalty, time to repeal. We have a pro speaker and a con speaker. You'll hear a lot about them later. We have a distinguished moderator. I'll talk about him in a bit. What I want to talk about first is the upcoming week. So I mentioned this is week 2. Week 3, next week, same time, same place, we're going to be talking about college affordability, whether or not it's worth it to go to college. And we're going to have some very distinguished guests on that panel as well. And our final week, November the 1st, same time, same place, it's going to be marijuana legalization to help us figure out how to vote on the measure on our ballots. And our moderator for that week will be Alan Thicke, the celebrity, and we'll have some very great panelists, pro and con. So I'm here representing ProCon.org. ProCon is a nonprofit, nonpartisan public charity. We serve an audience of about 25 million people annually. Our purpose is to provide pro and con research on controversial issues so that the rest of us don't have to spend weeks of our lives trying to do the research ourselves. We try to make it easy, put it all in one place so that you can read both sides and make up your own minds without the influence of bias or advertising or anything else. Just an honest oasis on the internet for pros and cons. Today, if you are taking photographs and want to tweet about the event, our hashtag for tonight is hashtag #SmartPeopleInChairs. Smart people in chairs. So we hope to see you on Twitter with those photographs. Tonight's format, so you know what to expect. We're going to have our opening speaker talk for 3 minutes, our opponents speak for 3 minutes, and then there's going to be a moderator-led discussion. That discussion will last about 20 minutes long. While that's happening, you should be thinking of the question that you want to ask. We're going to have about a 15 or 20 minute period for audience Q&A. Wherever you are sitting, if you have a question, think about it now, because you'll have an opportunity to ask it. I will be roaming the audience, and I'll give you the mic to ask your questions. So just start thinking about your questions now. Then we'll have a 2 minutes closing by each speaker, and then we will end the night whenever me, Kami, that's my name, Kami, whenever I say good night. And it ain't over till I say good night, so that's the rule. Now, I want to now introduce our distinguished moderator, and just to be exciting, I'm going to walk to this side. So our distinguished moderator, sitting here in the middle, is Mr. Ben Allen. He is a California state senator. He represents this area. Ben also grew up here in Santa Monica. Both of his parents are educators, and they would be so proud of Ben because he graduated from Harvard with a bachelor's degree in history, graduated from Cambridge University with a master's degree, and he graduated with his law degree from UC Berkeley. Certainly his educated parents, I'm sure, are proud. Now, we also have he has worked as a private attorney since 2008. He has committed himself to public service in many different ways. He's taught at local elementary and high schools. He's a lecturer at UCLA Law School, and he was the student regent for the University of California system. He was a staffer for Congressman Jose Serrano out of New York. He clerked at the United Nations. He served as the board president for the Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District. And in 2014, Ben was elected as California State Senator for the 26th District. This is a very large district he represents. Goes all the way from Pacific Palisades down to Palos Verdes, Catalina Island, you can kind of see in the distance, to Venice Beach, all the way to Hollywood. A big district. We are so lucky to have him here as our moderator tonight, and we're very grateful to you. Thank you, Ben. So I will leave you in his capable hands, and you'll see me again for audience Q&A. And remember, it ain't over until Kami says it's over at the very end. So thank you very, very much, folks. We look forward to a spirited and civil debate.
Thank you so much, Kami, and thank you everybody for coming out. This beautiful, beautiful evening. We decided to wait a little bit just to allow the sun to go down, but it's so gorgeous. And of course, I placed my hat here strategically, perhaps passive-aggressively, to acknowledge the fact that even though we may be divided on issues such as the death penalty and others, we come together for the Dodgers in the playoffs at a moment like this. So we're going to be talking about the, oh, you're not from LA? Where is it? I hope we don't have a Cubs fan.
Having fun.
All right. So we're going to have a lively discussion today about a very difficult topic, and it's a topic that has been something that humans have discussed and struggled with since the dawn of time, and that's the question of the death penalty. The question of the extent to which the community, the state, the polis has the right to take a life of someone who has taken a life, and all of the different implications and aspects of that debate and discussion. Now, it turns out that this discussion isn't just a theoretical one or a broader political one for all of us here in California. In fact, we all have to make a decision, two important decisions, November 8th. And in fact, you can even make your decision now and vote early, because that option now exists for everybody here in the state. So we'll be weighing in on 17 different propositions, and I've got my handy-dandy booklet here that I've been reading carefully. And I will say, I really do encourage people to go through this booklet, because there's a lot of very interesting information in the booklet, and it does a good job of explaining all the different implications of the various propositions that you're going to have to cast a vote on. And we're going to be focused on two tonight, Proposition 62 and Proposition 66. Now, Prop 62 calls for an outright repeal of the death penalty. And the idea is that it would replace the death penalty with life in prison without the possibility of parole. And it's a pretty simple measure. Prop 66, on the other hand, would maintain the death penalty in place, and actually it aims to speed up the appeals process and the time frame. So we have very different propositions, and the fascinating thing is that voters will be able to vote for both. My understanding is that if both propositions pass, the one with a higher number of votes will be the one that kicks in and becomes law in any area where there may be discrepancy between the two propositions. So that's an interesting conundrum as well. Now, California, of course, has a very contentious recent history with capital punishment. We did have the death penalty throughout the history of the state until 1972, when the California Supreme Court, in the famous case of People versus Anderson, decided to deem the death penalty unconstitutional under the California state constitution. And there was quite a public backlash against that decision, and the public ended up reinstating the death penalty through the passage of Proposition 17. Now, since that initial revival of public conversation of capital punishment, there have been a number of challenges to the methods used in capital punishment, and we'll have an opportunity to talk about them as we go along through this evening. But the court has made some interesting rulings. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that execution of a mentally ill offender is unconstitutional. It was a 6-3 vote in 2002 in Atkins versus Virginia. The U.S. Supreme Court in 1976 reaffirmed the constitutionality at the federal level of the death penalty for aggravated murder. What's interesting in the state of California is that since the reinstatement of the death penalty, there have been 930 individuals who have received a death sentence since 1978. 15 of them have been executed. So 930 have received a death sentence since 1978. 15 have been executed. 103 have died prior to being executed. 64 have had their sentences reduced by the courts, and 748 are in state prison with death sentences. And because of legal issues surrounding the state's lethal injection procedures, executions have not taken place in the state of California since 2006. So while the death penalty is still in place, it's still legal in the state of California, there's not been a single person put to death under our death penalty laws in California since 2006, over the last 10 years. So we've got a real treat tonight, because we've got two fascinating people, and actually they're people who are both in this little booklet. It turns out that Gil Garcetti, who's here to debate for a repeal of the death penalty, actually signed the rebuttal argument to Prop 66 that was signed by Ms. Hannessy. Gil Garcetti is, of course, our former LA district attorney. He served as the DA here in LA County from 1992 to 2000. He's also been featured in many mini-series recently on Los Angeles television. But Gil's had a really distinguished career in the law and now in the arts. He had 32 years with the LA County District Attorney's Office. He's now a very accomplished photographer and has been traveling all over the world and he's a very dapper dresser, and we're real excited to welcome him to the debate, Mr. Garcetti. He's also, I guess, the first father of the city of Los Angeles. Now let me also introduce Michelle Hannessy, who's on the con repeal position, so the idea being that she supports the death penalty, and she did sign the ballot argument in favor of Proposition 66. Now Michelle is currently one of the Deputy District Attorneys for LA County. She's also president of the Association of Deputy District Attorneys, and we're really excited to have her here. She's a very talented prosecutor and very experienced, and is going to be a good debater. So we're in a critical moment in our country. We're, of course, experiencing this crazy debate at the national level, but we are going to have a civil, interesting, fascinating, meaty debate here tonight in Santa Monica. You're part of that movement. I appreciate you being here. So let's hear 3 minutes from opening remarks from District Attorney Garcetti.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Before I start my 3 minutes, I want to take one vote. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand because Michelle and I, we know each other, so we can talk like we do know each other. So Michelle and I would like to know, I think, where you stand right now. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand after I ask these 3 questions. 1, are you in favor of the death penalty right now? Are you opposed to the death penalty? Are you undecided about the death penalty? And don't be ashamed. You know, this is what we're here for. So raise your hand if you are.
Yeah, your mic is not doing well.
Where is that?
Turn him on.
It's a hot mic.
Turn on.
Yeah.
Mic is there.
Michelle?
I totally did that. I thought I had it fixed.
Yours is good. Yours is good. We hear you.
I know. I made it that way.
It must be a conspiracy.
Very clever. No, still not on.
Can we just give you yours? Mine. Here, take mine.
Borrow the hand mic for a minute. Oh, there you go.
All right. Ooh, there is a difference.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. For those of you who didn't hear me, I'm going to take a quick vote. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you're in favor of the death penalty, and then I'm going to ask you, are you opposed to the death penalty, and third, are you undecided? Because that's what we're here for. So if you're in favor of the death penalty, would you raise your hand? Okay. If you're opposed to the death penalty, would you raise your hand? If you are undecided about the death penalty, raise your hand. Cool. That's great. All right. That makes it interesting for all of us. Michelle thought she was coming here to Santa Monica. Okay. All right. So my 3 minutes begins. Got it? Okay. All right. Here I am. You know, I left the office in December 2000. I had been the district attorney and also the chief deputy district attorney for a total of 12 years in those 2 positions. And I did support the death penalty the way our office in Los Angeles implemented the death penalty. I don't speak to the rest of the state as to how they implement the death penalty. But then some years after I left, I started asking about what's going on here, and I finally asked the question that eventually I would ask to anyone who's in favor of the death penalty, and that is, what useful purpose does the death penalty serve? And I started exploring that question quite systematically. I started reading more. I started talking to people, started talking to so-called experts. And my conclusion was it serves no useful purpose. Because now, even our current DA is in agreement, there's no deterrent effect. When I was district attorney, I thought, well, maybe it does have a deterrent effect. And that's how I could justify it. But there isn't any deterrent effect. So what is it about? I guess you can say it's about vengeance. You can use a different word, retribution, perhaps. But regardless, I concluded it serves no useful purpose, and there are other consequences. It's incredibly expensive. The legislative analyst says it costs about $150 million every year just for this process. $150 million. It's a lot of money. And for what purpose? What do we get from this? And I'm not going to answer all the questions I ask unless you come back to me later. Then I'll start in. So I only have 3 minutes. But there's also another huge cost. How many of you know that there are more than 150 people who've been on death rows throughout the country that are no longer there because they didn't deserve to be there, including 3 people in California. So we now have 749 people on California's death row, not 748, 749 people. I'll get this, yeah. 749. In my gut, I know there's more than one person who does not deserve to be on death row. When you say change it to life without possibility of parole, doesn't that really protect everyone? Because that person, man or woman, is never going to get out of prison. That person will die. That person will die a natural death in prison. Plus, you take away all the perks that a death row inmate has. And I smile about that because a former colleague of mine who became a defense lawyer and represented someone who's on death row right now, on Sunday at the Brentwood Mart, he reminded me that his client told him, get me on death row. I said, what? Get me on death row. I'll have a private cell. I'll have my own computer. I'll have my own television. All the meals are brought to me. Anytime I want to see a doctor, they come and see me. I'll have 24/7 people. Hello. People will have 24/7 access to me. Yeah, put me on death row. I'll die on death row, but not being by execution. And the last thing I would mention, because I had a little interruption there, was when you talk to the families of the victims, please understand, they will never, ever have closure. It's never going to happen. But what you can do by passing Proposition 62 is you can give them legal closure. They don't have to worry that in 10, 20, 32 years is one case. The court will reverse it, and they're going to have to start all over again. That's what 62 does.
Thank you. Thank you. So you've heard a forceful advocacy for Proposition 62. We'll next turn to Michelle, who actually helped to author Proposition 66.
Thank you. How's my mic working? Is it working? Okay, great. Look, if you're morally opposed to the death penalty, I'm not here to change your mind.
Okay, I got it.
Mine's touchy too. Look, no one should try to change your mind if that is your moral position. I'm here to talk to the people who really aren't sure, or maybe support the death penalty but think it's not working here or are not sure what the correct position is. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Proposition 66 is not just something that was thoughtlessly cobbled together. It's based on the recommendations of many, many experts over the years. A former Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, long and studied law review articles by law professors, recommendations that came from Sacramento legislatures, and even some of it is taken from death penalty opponents. And one of the key things it does is it speeds up death penalty appeals by doing the one thing that doesn't help anyone, which is waiting. Right now, there